Rumpole and the Angel of Death by John Mortimer. Read by Leo McKern. Rumpole and the Angel of Death. I have from time to time in these memoirs had some harsh things to say about judges, utterances of mine which may, I'm afraid, have caused a degree of resentment among their assembled lordships, who like nothing less than being judged themselves. Being continually bowed to and asked if your lordship pleases is likely to unhinge the best balanced legal brain, and I've never thought that those who were entirely sane would undertake the thankless task of judging their fellow human beings anyway. However, the exception to the above rule was old Chippy Chippenham. When I appeared before him, I would invariably get a note from him saying, "Horace, how about a jar when all this nonsense is over?" The last time I appeared before Chippy, he had changed. He found it difficult to remember the name of the fraudster in the dock, or whether he dealt in spurious loft conversions or non-existent caravans. He quite forgot to invite me round for a jar. Later, I heard he had retired and gone to live with some relatives in London. Later still, he appeared in the curious case of Regina versus Dr. Elizabeth Ireton as the victim of an alleged murder. The Angel of Death no doubt appears in many guises. She may not always be palely beautiful and shrouded in black. In the particularly tricky case which called on my considerable skills, and had a somewhat surprising result, the fell spirit appeared as a dumpy, grey-haired, bespectacled lady. She was a Dr. Elizabeth Ireton, known to her many patients and admirers as Dr. Betty. I'll admit I was rather distracted that breakfast time in the kitchen of our so-called mansion flat in the Gloucester Road. I was trying to make notes in the case of Dr. Ireton, with whom I had a conference booked for 5 o'clock. My usual calm detachment about the case was unsettled by the discovery that the corpse in question was that of Judge Chippy. I stuffed the papers into my battered briefcase, placed my pen in the top pocket, and submerged my dirty plate and cutlery in the washing-up bowl in accordance with the law formulated by she who must be obeyed. "Rumpole?" The voice of authority was particularly sharp that morning. "Have you the remotest idea what you've done?" "A remote idea, Hilda." "And I suppose you intend to appear in court with the butter-knife sticking out of your top pocket, having thrown your fountain pen into the sink?" My mind was on more serious subjects. Particularly it was on Dr. Ireton, up on charge of wilful murder. "Dr. Betty? She's the most wonderful person, truly wonderful." "She's accused of doing in his honour Charles Chippy Chippenham." "She didn't do it, Rumpole." "Oh, my dear old thing, I'm sure you know best." "I was at school with her." "I promised you'd get her off." When I got to Chambers, I found my room inhabited by a tallish, thinnish man in a blue suit. This intruder appeared to be measuring my room and the top of my desk with a long, wavering metal tape. "Ah, it's Horace Rumpole, isn't it? I'm Vince." "Vince?" "Vince Blewett." "Glad to know you, Mr. Blewett. I'm just measuring your workspace so as I can see if it makes sense in terms of your personal throughput in the organisation's overall workload." "I've no idea what you're talking about, but I assume you're only passing through." "Oh, hasn't Sam Ballard told you? My appointment was confirmed at the last Chambers meeting." "I've given up Chambers meetings." There's another thought I'd like to share with you. Oh, please don't share anything else with me. Looking at your own workload, Horace, what strikes me is this. You fight all your cases. They go on far too long. Oh, of course, you get daily refreshers, don't you? Whenever I can. But the brief fee for the first day has far more profitability. If you're trying to say it's worth more money, the answer is yes. So why not accept the brief and bargain for a plea, whatever you do? That way you could increase market share on your personal achievement record. And a lot of innocent people might end up in chokey. You say you've joined our chambers. You a lawyer? Oh, good heavens, no. My experience was in business. Sam Ballard headhunted me from catering. Be so good as to leave me, Blewett. After our new legal administrator had left my presence, I refreshed my memory from the papers in front of me on the circumstances of old Chippy's death. He had lived with his wife Connie in a large Victorian house near Holland Park until she died of cancer. Chippy was heartbroken and began to show the early symptoms of the disease which led to his retirement from the bench, Alzheimer's. As he became increasingly helpless, Chippy's nephew Dickie and Dickie's wife Ursula moved in to look after him. They kept their 10-year-old son, Andrew, reasonably quiet, and they devoted themselves to the old man. He was also cared for by a nurse Pargeter and by Dr. Betty. When she left, Dr. Betty would, on her own admission, leave her patient a sleeping tablet, or even two, to see him through the night. One night the Chippenhams went out to dinner. Nurse Pargeter had been engaged with another patient, and Dr. Betty volunteered to sit with Chippy. When the Chippenhams returned home, Dr. Betty told them that her patient was asleep, and she left them. The old man died that night, with a suddenness that the nurse, who found him in the morning, thought suspicious. Dr. Betty was charged with murder. She was given bail, and her trial was due to start in 3 weeks' time. Hilda told me that you don't think life should be needlessly prolonged in certain circumstances. Is that right? Oh, yes, Dr. Betty said. Do you think that sufferers from Alzheimer's disease are appropriate candidates for the Elysian fields? Of course they are. I'd fully decided to send old Chippy off there as soon as I judged the time was ripe. My heart sank. I had to tell Dr. Betty that she had as good as pleaded guilty. No, I haven't, she told me. I'm not guilty of anything. You're not. Of course not. So do you think, I threw Dr. Betty a lifeline, Chippy might have got depressed during the night and committed suicide? Of course not. Oh, I'd never had a client who was so cheerfully anxious to sink herself. It hadn't been an easy day, and to go straight home to Froxbury Mansions without a therapeutic visit to Pomeroy's wine bar would have been like facing an operation without an anaesthetic. So, because my alcohol content had sunk to a dangerously low level, I pushed open the glass door and made for the bar. I saw on top of a stool our learned clerk. Oh, cheer up, Henry. It may never happen. It has happened, Mr. Rumpole. Our new legal administrator has happened. Oh, you mean the blighter Blewett? Tell me honestly, Mr. Rumpole, have you ever seriously considered taking your own life? I have never felt the slightest temptation to place my head in the gas oven. Neither have I, Henry told me, and I congratulated him. We're all electric at home. But I have to say I'm tempted by a handful of aspirins. Merci, I told him. and in my experience not entirely dependable. But why this desperate remedy? Because I'm losing my job. Further inquiry revealed that Skinflint Bollard had decided to get rid of a decent old-fashioned barrister's clerk who got a percentage of our takings, and to appoint a legal administrator at what I was to discover was a ludicrously high salary. "This man Blewett," I said, "appears to be a considerable blot on the landscape, one that must be removed for the general health of Chambers." "Then I'll leave it to you, Mr. Rumpole." Henry seemed to cheer up considerably. "I just heard a really ripe one in here, Mr. Rumpole. Do you know, sir, the one about the sleeveless woman?" "I do not know it, Henry, but I suppose I very soon shall. As a matter of fact, I never did. Long before the delayed climax, I shut off, being lost in my own thoughts." Then Henry laughed loudly. I joined in for the sake of manners, but now I was thinking that I had to win the case of Blewett as well as that of Dr. Betty, and I had no idea how I was to emerge triumphant from either. We don't call this a memorial service. We call it a joyful thanksgiving for the life of His Honour Judge Chippenham. So said the Reverend Edgedale, the Temple's resident cleric. Sitting at the back of the congregation, I thought that old Chippy wasn't in a position to mind much what we called it. When we joined in the general rush for the light of day, I heard a gentle voice. "Mr. Rumpole, how delighted Uncle Chippy would have been that you could join us." I focused on a pleasant-looking youngish woman pushing back loose hair which strayed across her forehead. Beside her stood an equally pleasant tall man in his 40s. Both of them smiled as though their natural cheerfulness could survive even this sad occasion. "Dick and Ursula Chippenham," the tall man bent down considerably to inform me. "Uncle Chippy was always talking about you. Said you could be a devilishly tricky customer in court, but he always enjoyed having you in for a jar when the battle was over." Chippy was so fond of his jar. What he wanted was to ask all his real friends back to toast his memory, Ursula told me. "Do say you'll come." I honestly don't say. It's 31 Dettington Road, Holland Park." Dick Chippenham smiled down on me from a great height. "Chippy would have been so delighted if you were there to say good-bye." I splurged out on a taxi from the Temple to Dettington Road. As I paid it off, I saw a solemn boy come down the steps of the house, and in a sudden, furtive motion, collect the black plastic bags from the top of the dustbin, stuff them under his school blazer, and disappear into a side entrance of the house. I climbed up the front steps, rang the bell, and was admitted by a butler-like person. Ursula Chippenham bore down on me with a welcome glass of champagne. "We're so glad you came." She moved me into a corner and spoke confidentially, much more in sorrow than in anger. "Dr. Betty got on so terribly well with Chippy. We never thought for a moment that she'd do anything like that." Well, perhaps she didn't. Of course, Dick and I don't want anything terrible to happen to her. Neither do I. We know you'll do your very best for her. I suppose you know that she was against, prolonging life?" "Of course. But she only came to us when Chippy took against poor Dr. Eames." "Oh, when was that exactly?" "About 6 months ago." "And how did you happen to hear of Dr. Betty Ireton?" "Oh, some friends of mine at Cambridge Terrace. They said that she was an absolute angel." "Oh, there you are, Podgy. This is Nurse Pargeter, Mr. Rumpole." The nurse wasn't in uniform, but was solemnly dressed in a plain black frock and white collar. "Are you family?" the nurse asked. "No, I'm a barrister, an old friend of Chippy's." "Mr. Rumpole? I think I've heard him mention you." "I'm glad. And then, of course, I have the unenviable task of defending Dr. Betty Ireton. Mrs. Chippenham says she got on rather well with the old boy." "Defend her? She cannot be defended. I warned the Chippenhams against her. They can't say I didn't warn them. I told them all about that dreadful organization. Lethe, isn't it called?" "Everyone can be defended," I corrected her as gently as possible. "Of course, whether the defence is successful is entirely another matter. I prefer to remember the 10 Commandments on the subject." "Oh, the 10 Commandments. As for thou shalt not kill, well, some people think that the terminally ill should be helped out of their misery. And some people happen to believe in the sanctity of life. And now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Rumpole, I have an important meeting to go to." As I watched her leave, a small boy piped up at my elbow. "Would you like one of these, sir?" It was young Andrew Chippenham with a plate of small brown envelope arrangements made of brittle pastry. "Well, how do you like being a waiter?" I asked Andrew. "Not much. I'd like to get back to my painting." "Oh, you're an artist?" "Of course not." He looked extremely serious. "I mean painting my model aeroplanes." "I say, Andrew, I'd love to see your collection." So he put down his plate, and we escaped from the party. Andrew's room was on the 3rd floor at the back of the house. In the front a door was opened, and I got a glimpse of a big, airy room with a bed stripped, and the windows open. "I suppose your parents' bedroom's on the floor below?" It wasn't the subtlest way of getting information. "Oh, yes, I'm all alone up here now." Andrew opened the door of his room. From what seemed to be every inch of the ceiling, a thread had been tied or tacked to hold up a fighter or an old-fashioned seaplane in full flight. "Are these all the models you've made?" I asked Andrew. "Or have you got lots more packed away in black bin bags?" "Bin bags?" He was fiddling with a half-painted Concorde on his desk. "Why do you say that?" "Well, you know, the plastic bags the dustmen leave after they've taken away the rubbish. Don't you collect them? A lot of boys do." "Collect plastic bags? What a funny thing to do." Andrew had his head down and was still fiddling with his model. "That wouldn't interest me, I'm afraid. I haven't got any plastic bags at all." Back in chambers that afternoon, I found Dot Clapton alone in front of her typewriter, frowning as she looked over a brightly coloured brochure. "I'm afraid Henry's just slipped out, Mr. Rumpole." She handed me the brochure in silence. On the front of it was emblazoned, "The 5S Holidays. Sea, sun, sand, singles and sex on the Costa del Sol. Why not go for it?" "Quite honestly, is that your idea of a holiday, Mr. Rumpole?" "It sounds," I had to tell her, "like my idea of hell. My boyfriend's planning to take me to castles down the Rhine. Of course, I don't want to upset him." "Upset your boyfriend?" "No, upset Mr. Blewett." "Upsetting Mr. Blewett, I have to say this, Dot, is my idea of a perfect summer holiday." I took my leave of her, saying that I was on my way to see Mr. Ballard. "Oh, he's busy. He said he wasn't to be disturbed." "Then it will be my pleasure to disturb him." "Have you eaten on the insane route?" I asked egregious Ballard, with what I hoped sounded like a genuine concern. "That takes the reason prisoner?" "What do you mean, Rumpole?" I mean no one who has retained one single marble would dream of introducing the light bluet into equity court. You'll have to face it, my dear old Horace. You don't understand the modern world. I understand it well enough to be able to tell a decent, honest, efficient, if rather over-amorous clerk from the dubious flogger of suspect Spanish holidays, I said. The clerking system is out of date, Horace. Vincent says we must earn our keep by a rise in productivity. Business, Rumpole, makes the world go round. Oh, let's stop arguing. Get rid of the blot, confirm Henry in his job, and we need say no more about it. I'm sure you'll find Vincent Blewett is a great asset to Chambers, Rumpole. He's a very human sort of person. He likes his joke, I understand. I'm sure you'll have plenty of laughs together. If he stays, he is staying. That evening, before the news, there were some pictures of a pro-life demonstration outside an abortion clinic in St. John's Wood. Prominent among those present was Nurse Pargie, waving a placard on which was written the words, "Thou shalt not kill." Alzheimer's isn't a killer in itself. Well, certainly the patient gets weaker and more forgetful, helpless in fact, but it would need something more to kill Chippy, like an overdose of sleeping pills, for instance. Evidently that's what did it. Dr. Betty was one of those awkward clients, it seemed, who felt impelled to tell the truth. I might have given Chippy an overdose of something when the time came, but it hadn't come on the night he died. At which moment there was a rapid knock on the door, which immediately opened to admit Blewett's head. He took a quick look at the assembled company and said, "Sorry, folks. Mustn't interrupt the workers' productivity. Speak to you later, Horace." At which, as rare things will, he vanished. Who on earth was that extraordinary man? For the first time Dr. Betty looked shaken. "Oh, a temporary visitor," I told her. "Now, tell me about the sleeping pills." "I gave him 2. "And you saw him drink his whisky?" "A small whisky and soda, yes." "And then?" "Oh, he seemed tired and dreamy. Quite soon after he settled down, I heard the Chippenhams come home from their dinner party, so I went downstairs to meet them." "What happened to the bottle of pills?" "Well, that was kept in the house." "Kept where in the house?" "I put them back in the bathroom cupboard." "Are there 2 bathrooms?" "Yes, the one next to the judge's bedroom." "And young Andrew?" "Oh, his mother had sent him up to bed before they went out. But I'm afraid he hadn't gone to sleep." "How do you know that?" "When I went to put the pills back in the bathroom, I saw his light on and his bedroom door open. He was still reading, or playing with his model aeroplanes, most likely." I turned to Bonnie Bernard, my instructing solicitor. "I think it might just be worth getting a statement from a Dr. Eames," I said. "Oh, and a few inquiries about the firm of Marcellus and Chippenham, house agents and surveyors." "David Eames?" Dr. Betty looked doubtful. "He treated Chippy before you came on the scene. He might know if he's ever talked of suicide." Dr. Betty again spurned the line of defence. "As I told you, I'm quite sure he never contemplated such a thing." "So if you didn't kill him, Dr. Betty, who do you think did?" She was looking at me quite serious then, as she said, "Well, that's not for me to say, is it?" "Sorry to have intruded on your conference." I had hardly recovered from the dismal prospect of defending Dr. Betty when Blewett blew in. "I wanted a word with you about formatizing staff holidays. You thinking of getting away to the sun yourself?" "Hardly," I told him, having glanced at the brochure you gave Dot Clapton. "Oh, sea, sand, and sex, Rumpole. You'd enjoy that. Oh, very relaxing." Vince gurgled. I'm hardly a single. Well, send the wife on a tour of the Lake District or something, and you head off to the Costa del Sol. That's my advice. I mean, when you're invited to a gourmet dinner, why take a ham sandwich, eh? Some glimmering hope, a faint idea of a plan, led me to encourage the blot. Considerable fun, these singles' holidays, are they, Vincent? You're not joking. Ha! First day you get there, as soon as you've checked in, it's down to the beach for games to break the ice. Games? I'll just tell you one. Whet your appetite. Carry on. The fellas get to blow up balloons inside the girls' bikini bottoms, and then the girls do it vice versa in our shorts. Ha! By the time we've played that, everyone's a swinger. Oh, it sounds very tasteful. I never knew you were a swinger, Horace. Oh, we all have our joys and desires. Don't we just? Heard any good ones lately? Ones? You know, jokes. You mean, I looked at him seriously, like the one about the sleeveless woman? Ah, isn't that a great story? Who ever told you that one, Horace? I looked him straight in the eye and lied with complete conviction. Oh, Sam told me that. It's just his type of humour. Sam? Vincent was puzzled. You know, our learned head of chambers. Soapy Sam Ballard. I've often noticed that before any big and important cause or matter, and no one could doubt the size and importance of Regina versus Dr. Betty, a kind of peace descends on my legal business. In other words, I hit a slump. I had no wish to spend 24 hours a day closeted with Hilda, so I went on a number of errands. I was walking, wrapped in thought, through Carmine Place, when I saw the familiar sight of purple blazers marching towards me. I saw, taking up the vanguard, Andrew Chippenham. "Andrew," I called out in my matiest tones, "how are you, old boy? Marching up with your regiment to lay siege to the Albert Hall, are you? Or on the hunt for bin-bags?" When he heard my voice, young Andrew stopped, apparently frozen, his head down. He raised it slowly, and what I saw was a small, serious boy, frozen in terror. Before I could speak again, he had turned and run off after his vanishing crocodile. A few days later, I took a trip on the tube back to my chambers. I was trying to fathom out the Times crossword when the blot oozed through the door and defiled my carpet. "I thought it might be rather appropriate," he said, "if we gave a great party in Chambers to mark Henry's career change." Some sort of a plan began to take shape in my mind. "Oh, why does it have to be a great party?" "Because." "Horace, you're not suggest a bit of a singles do." "Why not?" "Leave the ham sandwiches at home, eh?" "Exactly." "Only one drawback as far as I know." "Oh, what's that?" "We'll have to ask permission from the head of chambers." Vincent looked doubtful and disappointed. "The head of chambers would be furious if he weren't included," I assured him. "Put the whole proposition to him, Vincent. Put it in detail." After the blot had left me, suitably encouraged, I went home on the Underground. Emerging from Gloucester Road Station, I saw the formation of purple blazers bearing down on me remorselessly. The CO halted the column and looked at me. "Are you the person who spoke to Chippenham the other day, down at the end of the line?" she asked me. "Well, it just so happens that I know the family." "Whether you do or don't, he was obviously shocked. Ever since he met you, Chippenham's been away sick." When I got back to the mansion flat, I found a message for me to bring my instructing solicitor. Bernard told me that Dr. Eames was of the talkative variety, and seemed to have something he was strongly anxious to tell me. I discovered that our case was to come before Mrs. Justice Erskine Brown, for so long the Portia of our chambers. I have a distinct fondness for Portia, which I have reason to believe is suitably returned. I hoped she might feel some sympathy for a case which in other hands was likely to prove equally difficult for Dr. Betty Ireton and Horace Rumpole. Their hopes were dashed quite early on in the proceedings. It may be argued on behalf of the defence. The prosecutor was the beefy Q.C. Barrington McKern. I had privately christened him Cut Above McKern. This old gentleman was on his way out anyway, so Dr. Ireton committed an act of mercy, and not an act of murder. Such a defence will receive very little sympathy in this court, Mr. McKern. Oh, I do so entirely agree with your ladyship. So it will be interesting to discover if Mr. Rumpole has a defence. May I remind my learned friend, I climbed to my feet and spoke, I think with admirable courtesy, that a prosecutor's job is to prove the charge and not speculate about the nature of the defence. So Cut Above turned to tell the jury that they would find the evidence he was about to call entirely persuasive, and leading to the inevitable verdict of guilty on Dr. Ireton. Dick Chippenham was the sort of witness that Cut Above could understand and respect. When he had finished his examination, Cut Above said, "I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to wait there a few minutes more." So I began. Mr. Chippenham, I have only a few questions. Up to 6 months before he died, your uncle was attended by Dr. Eames. That is so. You then engaged Dr. Ireton. Why did you choose her? She was a local doctor who had treated one of my wife's friends. When you and your wife got back from the dinner party, it was about 11 o'clock? Yes. And apart from your uncle, the only people in the house were Dr. Betty Ireton and your son? That's right. Dr. Betty met us in the hall and said she'd given Chippy his pills and a drink of whiskey. When you got upstairs, you went in to see your uncle? We did. Was he asleep? Yes. Was he still breathing? Oh, I'm sure he was. Otherwise, we would have called for help immediately. You noticed the bottle of whiskey. Was it empty? It must have been, but I can't say I noticed it then. And the bottle of pills had been put away in the bathroom? Yes, I believe it had. My wife will tell you. So you can't be sure how many pills were left when you last saw your uncle alive? In the morning I saw the bottle of pills empty. And in the morning your uncle was dead? Yes, he was. Thank you very much, Mr. Chippenham. I sat down with what I hoped was a good deal more satisfaction than I felt. Dr. Roger Eames was a rare bird, a doctor who liked talking to lawyers. So it seems likely that death was hurried on in some way? I think that must follow. Dr. Ackerman of the morgue, the Home Office pathologist, estimates death as between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. Yes, I read that. Tell me, Doctor, did you know Nurse Pargeter? Only too well. Did you like her? Pro-life nurses can be a menace. And she didn't care for Dr. Betty. No, she hated her. One thing more, Dr. Eames, now that I've got you here. Aren't you treating young Andrew? He seemed a charming boy. I'm not sure what's the matter with him. Some sort of nervous trouble. Something's worrying him terribly. I spoke to him in the street, and the schoolmistress ticked me off for it. But that couldn't have had anything to do with his illness, could it? I'm afraid you reminded him of something. I felt a prickle of excitement. Oh, what exactly? I think I know. It was something you'd said before when you came to the house. It reminded him of his dream. Without doubt, the jury took strongly to Ursula Chippenham, and I have to say that I also liked her. If I'd wanted to lose Dr. Betty's case, I'd have gone into the attack on Ursula with my guns blazing. Of course I didn't. Mrs. Chippenham, I hope it won't offend you if I call the deceased Judge Chippy? Not at all, Mr. Rumpole. I'm sure he would have liked us all to call him that. And that's how he was affectionately known at the bar, Portia added to the warmth of the occasion. And Chippy was extremely ill? Yes, he was. And entirely to your credit, you and your husband looked after him with medical help. We did our best, yes. He was unlikely to recover? He wasn't going to recover. I don't think there's a cure for Alzheimer's. Can we come to the time when Dr. Betty started to treat Chippy? Was Nurse Pargeter coming in then? Yes, she was. And Nurse Pargeter strongly disapproved of Dr. Betty's support for legalizing euthanasia. She warned us about Dr. Betty, yes. And you discussed the matter with your husband? Oh, yes, we thought about it very carefully. And then I had a talk about it with Dr. Betty. Did you? Was your husband present? No, I didn't want it to be too formal. I looked round at the dock where Dr. Betty was shaking her head decisively. So I was put in the embarrassing position of having to call the witness a liar. Mrs. Chippenham, I have to remind you that you said nothing about this conversation with Dr. Betty in your original statement to the police. Oh, didn't I? We've heard that it was Nurse Pargeter who found Chippy dead. Yes, she called for me and I joined her. And it was Nurse Pargeter who reported the circumstances of Chippy's death to the police. She insisted on doing so. And you agreed? I think I was too upset to agree or disagree. I see. Now that morning when the nurse found Chippy dead, the whiskey bottle was almost empty and the bottle of sleeping pills completely empty. You don't know how that came about? I assumed that Dr. Betty gave Chippy the overdose and the whiskey. You assume that because she's a well-known supporter of euthanasia? Well, yes, I suppose so. Because she believes in euthanasia, she's the most likely suspect. Isn't that obvious, Mr. Rumpole? Portia answered the question for the witness. And because she was the most likely suspect, is that why you decided to ask her to look after Chippy? I asked Ursula the first hostile question with my usual charm. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I'll come back to it later, if I may. Mrs. Chippenham, we've got a copy of Chippy's will. Nurse Pargeter does quite well out of it, doesn't she? She gets a substantial legacy. £20,000. She did a great deal for Chippy. And let me tell you this. Your husband's in business as an estate agent, is he not? Marcellus and Chippenham, yes. It's going through a pretty difficult time, isn't it? I think the housing market is having a lot of difficulty, yes. Let's say that the freehold of the house in Dettington Street and the residue of Chippy's estate might solve a good many of your problems. Isn't that right? We were both extremely grateful for what Chippy decided to do for us. When he made that will, he understood it perfectly. Mrs. Chippenham, you know the way the Lethe organization recommends helping sufferers out of this wicked world?" "I'm afraid I don't." "Are you sure? Didn't Nurse Pargeter give you a pamphlet like this when she was trying to persuade you not to engage Dr. Betty?" I handed her the Lethe pamphlet which Bonnie Bernard had got me, and it was made Defence Exhibit 1. Then I asked the witness to turn to page 3, where the recipe for easeful death was set out. I read it aloud. "The method recommended is a large dose of sleeping pills, which are readily obtainable on prescription, and a strong alcoholic drink, such as whiskey or brandy. When the patient is asleep, a long plastic bin liner is placed over the head and pulled over the shoulders. Being deprived of air, the sleep is gentle, painless, and permanent." Did you read that when Nurse Pargeter gave you the pamphlet? I may have glanced at it." "You may have glanced at it. But I suggest that someone in your house remembered it quite clearly when old Chippy was helped out of this troubled world." Portia asked me to make it clear what my suggestion was. I said I was perfectly prepared to do so. "I suggest someone woke Chippy up around midnight. He hadn't remembered taking his pills, of course, so he was given a liberal overdose, washed down with a large whiskey. One of the large black bin liners that your dustman provides so generously was then made use of." Ursula was silent, but counsel for the prosecution wasn't. "I hope, my lady, that Mr. Rumpole will be calling evidence to support this extraordinary charge." I didn't answer him, but asked the witness, "Your son Andrew hasn't been well lately?" "I'm afraid not." "Mr. Rumpole?" Portia was clearly displeased. "The court would also like to know if you are going to call evidence to support the charge you've made." "I'm happy to deal with that, my lady, when I've asked a few more questions." I turned back to the witness. "Is Dr. Eames treating young Andrew?" "Yes, Dr. Eames has come back to us." "Is Andrew's illness of a nervous nature? I mean, has he become worried about something?" "I don't know." "Is Andrew worried about something he might have seen the night Chippy died? Remember, he sleeps with his door open, and Chippy's room is immediately opposite. He saw something that night which has worried him ever since. Perhaps that's why he collects the black plastic bags from the dustbins and hides them away. Is it because he knows bin bags can cause accidents?" Ursula's voice slid upwards and became shrill as he asked, "You say he saw— what did he see?" "He thought it was a dream, but it wasn't a dream, was it?" "My lady, are we really being asked to sit here while Mr. Rumpole trots out dreams of a 10-year-old child?" Cut Above boomed, but I interrupted his cannonade. "I'm not discussing dreams, I'm discussing facts. And the fact is," I turned to Ursula, "that you were coming out of Chippy's room that night, perhaps to take the bottle of pills back to the bathroom. It was then Andrew saw Chippy propped up on the pillows, shrouded Mrs. Chippenham, suffocated Mrs. Chippenham with a black plastic bag pulled down over his head." When Ursula spoke, her voice was hoarse and hopeless. She said, "You're not going to bring Andrew here to say that? About the plastic bag, are you?" "That entirely depends, Mrs. Chippenham, on whether you are going to tell us the truth." To her credit, she didn't hesitate. She was determined to spare her son, so she turned to Portia and said quietly, "I don't think he suffered, and he would have died anyway. When I thought of doing it, I got Dr. Ireton to treat Chippy so she would be blamed. That's all I've got to say." The case was over very quickly. I had notched a win, but I felt no triumph. Bonnie Bernard went about his business, and I stood alone outside the empty court. Rumpole, a word with you, if you please, in a matter of urgency. Soapy Sam Ballard had paused, wigged and gowned in full flight to another court. Bad news, I'm afraid. We shall not be entering into a contract of service with Vincent Blewett. I managed to restrain my tears. But Ballard, I protested, didn't you think he was the very man for the job? I did, until he came to me with an idea for a Chambers party. He described it as a singles party, and then he asked me to leave my ham sandwich at home. He was talking about my wife Marguerite. Can I believe my ears? Vincent Blewett called your Marguerite a ham sandwich? I was incredulous. It's not the only thing, Rumpole. You mean there's worse to come? Considerably worse. He suggested that the party should start. I don't know how to tell you this, Rumpole. Just take it slowly. I understand it must be distressing. It is, Rumpole, it certainly is. He thought the party should start by the male members of Chambers and the girl guests blowing up balloons inside each other's underclothes. And then to top it all, he topped that. He said he knew I liked a good story, and wasn't that a great joke about the sleeveless woman? What on earth was he talking about? I looked suitably mystified. I have no idea. Do you know any story about a sleeveless woman? Certainly not, I replied with absolute truth. I'm afraid I shall have to tell Chambers. I'm informing you first as a senior member. We shall not be employing Vincent Blewett or indeed any legal administrator in the foreseeable future. The case of Regina versus Ireton had not, so far as I was concerned, ended happily. Rumpole versus Blewett, on the other hand, was an undoubted victory. Well, win a few, lose a few. That's all you can say about life at the bar. Henry decided, in his considerable relief, that he should have a Chambers party to celebrate his not leaving. All the wives came. The day after this jamboree I was detained in bed with a ferocious headache and a distinct unsteadiness in the leg department. In a brief period of troubled sleep about midday, I heard voices from the living room, and then the door opened quietly, and the angel of death was at my bedside. "Mr. Rumpole," she smiled, and her glasses twinkled. "I hear you're not feeling very well this morning." "Oh, really?" I muttered with sudden alarm. "Whatever gave you that idea?" "Hilda tells me the dear old mind's not what it was." Dr. Betty smiled understandingly. "The butter knife in the top pocket, is that what she told me?" "Dear Mr. Rumpole, do remember I'm here to help you. There's no need for you to suffer. The way out is always open, and I can steer you gently and quite painlessly towards it." "I'm afraid I must ask you to leave now," I told the angel of death. "Got to get up. Late for work already. As I told you, never felt better. Full of beans, Dr. Betty, and raring to go." God knows how I ever managed to climb into the striped trousers or button the collar, but when I was decently clad I hot-footed it for the temple. There I sat in my room, suffering, my head in my hands, determined at all costs to keep myself alive. This audiobook was produced and published by Penguin Books Limited.